如果我告诉你是美国亲手把加勒比海的大门打开，恭恭敬敬把中国请进去的，你信吗？别不信，我是小满。今天咱们不看热闹，看点真切的国际笑话。一直以来，西方媒体都在炒作中国威胁论，说中国在加勒比海渗透，但在这个视频里，当事人巴巴多斯总理 Mia Mottley 直接撕开了真相。原来把小国推向中国的恰恰是美国自己。这事儿说起来简直荒谬。美国为了不让自家官员被国际法庭起诉，逼着全球小国签豁免协议，不签就断援助。这就像是一个霸道总裁对穷邻居说，你不答应帮我顶包，我就让你全家饿死。结果呢，穷邻居也是有骨气的，硬是没答应。接下来发生的事才是真正的神转折，精彩程度绝对不亚于好莱坞大片。
For the last 30 years, we've been arguing to the WTO that we need special and differential treatment as small states, and that my percentage share of global trade in goods is 0.000%. And my percentage share of global trade in services is 0.001%. So we have no capacity to distort global trade. But if you treat me as if I am equal to a large nation, then you will kill me before I can even start. You destroy anything that I can do to keep my population alive in terms of manufacturing or in terms of whatever.
Yeah.
So that there is the old Aristotelian principle, equality for equals and proportionality for unequals. And if we were simply to use that and to recognize that you can't have the same one-size-fits-all prescription, you can't do it in a family, far less a country, far less a global community. Yeah. And if we can get that, so many things that we've been trying to solve will find themselves in place. And part of the difficulty is that the new world post-1945 was still remade in an imperial order. So that all the talk about sovereignty and independent countries, you're independent so long as you do as I say. Not even as I do. Because when they told us don't do quantitative easing and don't print money, the truth is when COVID hit, what did the developed world do?
Oh, they printed
the G7
money.
printed and quantitative easing. And, so we have to find a way of letting some air, some oxygen, some transparency, some light, and to begin to see that the one-size-fits-all rule will not work, and that you have to be able to give a little elbow room. Not a lot, but a little elbow room for us to do the things that we need to do to keep our people alive, to keep our people prospering, to not cause our people to want to get into the things that you complain about globally in terms of migration or crime or all of the other things.
Yeah, I've always been fascinated by the, like, sometimes what I think is very short-term thinking from some of the bigger nations, in that they'll often think about mass migration, but they don't seem to wonder why people are leaving the place that they're in. The first part of me goes like, maybe it's just an arrogance.
I'll give you an example.
Yeah?
They do things that literally shoot themselves in the foot sometimes.
In what way?
In 2006 and 2007, there was a big debate about the International Criminal Court and the fact that the ICC, that U.S. heads of state and army, military people did not want to be subject to prosecution.
Right.
And they went around the world trying to get countries to agree that they should be exempted. And we in the Caribbean said, hey, we hear you, but one, it don't make sense because this is intended for all people.
Yep.
But two, even if it wasn't, this is the idea of the former Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, A.N.R. Robinson. And as a matter of solidarity, as well as principle, we can't do it. They said, well, if you don't do it, we're going to withdraw all military aid from your countries.
Wow.
I said, okay, that's not a wise thing to do, but
I mean, that's
we
also
talked
not
for a year, 18 months, and eventually they said, we're going to do it anyhow. What happens? Nature abhors a vacuum. China, who never had any relationship with any of the militaries in the region really, then stepped in and developed a relationship and provided training and equipment and things thereafter. Does that make sense to a country that is so frightened for China?
See, when you're saying that, I wish more people understood, especially Western nations, quote unquote. I wish they understood how many of the problems they're experiencing are created in a cycle.
Yep.
So friends and I were talking the other day. You can't talk about 9/11 without talking about Osama bin Laden. You can't talk about it without talking about Al-Qaeda. But then you can't talk about it without talking about the CIA, which you then can't talk about without talking about the US and what it was trying to do about communism.
Yep.
And now many of those people will go, oh, we did the wrong thing. But the effects are felt so many years later. And what you're saying is the same. If you watch the news in America, if you watch the news in the UK, let's say the BBC, they'll very quickly say, China's expanding. We've seen China here, and China's in Africa, and China's in the Caribbean, China's doing this, But I don't think I've seen any news reports that say, well, the US opened the door for China and the US reneged.
The North Atlantic countries have not necessarily treated to the issue of development in the post-colonial era as well as they could have. We talk about official development assistance being 0.7% of GDP. Most countries don't even observe that. But for countries,
as in that's a portion that they're supposed to contribute
to globally,
to developing nations. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But countries like my own have been said, oh, you're middle income, you don't need money from us. So we effectively don't get any aid from the USA or from Britain or whatever, other than a part of a regional study or a regional thing that is done. And that's one of the things that we've been arguing, and I'll come to that in a bit, because that's at the core of a lot of the development issues, that we are asked to be able to access capital from the official financial institutions, international financial institutions, on the basis of historic GDP per capita, which really doesn't, I tell people that is like taking my blood pressure 2 years ago to determine if I'm going to have a stroke today. It's completely irrelevant. You understand?
That's a great analogy.
So that what matters, because in 72 hours, a hurricane can hit me.
Yeah.
And I can have wipeout risk. Now, a hurricane can hit in Florida. You don't have wipeout risk. A hurricane hits in the Bahamas or Dominica, it's gone.
Yeah.
And instead of dealing with qualitative issues in education, you're now dealing with basic access to schools again. So we make the point that the North Atlantic countries, for whatever reason, had the Caribbean and a lot of the other small island developing states in the Pacific, etc., in a certain prism. This is how they view you. This is how they're going to relate to you. And China and India and others come along and say, oh, these are some of your real development needs. Oh, you need a gymnasium. Oh, you need help in building a port.
Yeah, you need a
road. You need help
in
doing roads. We're going to lend you the money at 3% or 2% or 4%. Who else is lending you that money? Nobody. So I think that, remember what I said, we want to be friends of all, satellites of none. So we're not looking to be anybody's pawn. But at the same time, we're not looking to be disadvantaged or unfared because you don't believe I should talk to my neighbor. When in truth, in fact, the neighbor's done me nothing. And then secondly, when I look at your circumstances, you have greater exposure with your treasuries to them than I have. The Chinese hold 4% of my debt. It can't do me. It can do me less than a hurricane can do me. There are others who hold a far greater percentage of my debt, and the Chinese hold far greater percentages of debt in the developed world,
right?
In the G7 countries.
It almost feels like a contradiction then in some ways. It's almost like some of the larger countries are basically restricting smaller countries from engaging in the best way, or even in an autonomous way, in the way that they feel is best for them.
But you see, you get it. So why do you get it? Because you've been exposed now to the facts. Tell me where in large developed countries are you exposing your population to the facts? Or is it purely an opiate diet that you give them with respect to entertainment and dulling down the senses and no real discussion? You look at the news at night and it's the same 5 stories being done on every channel when you look at this country or Britain or wherever.
所以说，世界潮流浩浩荡荡这帮北大西洋国家还活在1945年的帝国梦里呢。他们以为只要握着粗棒子，全世界就得听他们的。但他们忘了，人是要吃饭的。中国带来的不是枪炮和威胁，而是实实在在的体育馆、港口和公路、 是 2% 的利息，是平等的尊重。如果你是这些小国的领导人，面对美国的断援和中国的帮助，你会怎么选？你觉得美国现在的短视会在多少年后彻底葬送他们的全球霸权？